Hello and welcome to the Gnomecast. My name is Tarmack. I did a video a little while ago about game ownership, and I got a video response on YouTube from a member called Dingo. My biggest problem, he questioned whether the gnomes were all about World of Warcraft, or whether they were the garden variety. They are, of course, the much more dangerous garden variety. Everybody's worried about zombies, ninjas, pirates. Nobody really worries about the gnomes. Watch out for them. Of course, Dingo, I'm a little bit concerned about any sort of a were-dingo, two-legged dingo running around stealing babies. It's absolutely no good. So he had a little bit of a problem with some of the comments that I made, and I wanted to do a little bit of a clarification because I guess maybe I wasn't clear on some of it. To start off with, one of the comments was directed at Ubisoft and how this DRM wasn't such a big deal, and I think in the beginning, when he's talking about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood not giving any problems, that's because that game didn't have always-on DRM. It was never included with it. The games that were affected by the server migration and denial of service attacks that Ubisoft received were things like Assassin's Creed 2, Settlers 7, Hawk 2, Hawks 2, right, one of the Might and Magic games, and like a couple of other ones that were out there. Now, there was a comment made about how Ubisoft is in much more danger than the consumers. And this is a valid point. The consumer, at most, you risk the cost of your game. You know, maybe a little bit of your time. Ubisoft, by going down this road, they risk losing their customer base. And they've probably lost an awful lot more customers than they'd like to admit. But the biggest bee in my bonnet that I've got, to abuse as many possible phrases as I can, has to do with the single-player local experience. Dingo was talking a lot about how you lose access to things because you're hacking. And when it comes right down to it, all of these online services, they have not only the ability, but the obligation to make sure that their experience that they're giving to the customers doesn't allow a customer to degrade the experience of somebody else. And quite frankly, I get a little bit upset when a company doesn't do that. And this is where Xbox Live needs a little bit of improvement, because that's where a lot of problems exist as far as one customer pissing off or causing some frustration for another. But what I was talking about was the single-player experience. Single-player meaning on your own computer, playing by yourself, without any online modes at all. Always-on DRM gives the company the ability to remove the single-player experience from somebody. This is where it comes back to game ownership and what you do and do not own, or what you believe you own, and it turns out you don't really. No company should care what somebody does in their basement by themselves with a video game. It's just quite frankly not any of their business, as long as they're not impacting the experience of somebody else. And that's what the always-on DRM has as a problem, as well as the other digital distribution methods, Origin and Steam, that sort of thing. Now, Dingo goes on to say that we're not in a bad place, that nobody is really being affected by this. And the fact of the matter is that that's not correct. Ubisoft is the biggest example of where that has actually happened. There's been lesser examples in Steam and Origin. It hasn't been as big of a deal. But Ubisoft's problems had to do with two major events. The first was on release of, I believe it was Assassin's Creed 2. I could be wrong. But when the always-on DRM stuff started, a bunch of hacking groups decided that they were going to do some denial of service attacks. They brought down the Ubisoft authentication servers. This caused the people that had paid for the game to not be able to access the game. This is a true, honest, upfront effect that has happened to the consumer that is just unacceptable. Further on, they decide that they're going to be moving their authentication servers, and the same problem happens, even including games that weren't supposed to be affected. It caused an awful lot of problems. People weren't able to play their game. Do you want to know who was able to play their games just fine? All the pirates, because they didn't need an authentication server. So now you have a game or a product that the person that stole it is still able to use it when the person that bought it is not. And that's a huge problem for these companies. Steam and Origin take it to a little bit of a different method. having more to do with the account itself on a personal basis. Origin and EA had a bit of a problem because they were banning people from the single-player game when they banned them from the forums. Online forums, if you want to go and be a douche, that's fine. If they want to ban you, that's fine. Absolutely. Great idea because it gets you out of the community. It gets you away from the people that you are ruining their experience. But as soon as you take that and you remove the single-player access to the game that that person paid for, you've gone too far. Steam does the same thing, much to a lesser extent, which is, again, why they're mentioned last. It's not as big of an issue in that you don't lose access necessarily to one game. You would lose access to your entire Steam library, games that aren't even related to the one that you had started off with. Team Fortress 2, let's say. Let's say you managed to get yourself banned. You're not allowed to play that one online because of whatever you managed to do. All of your single-player games are gone. All of your indie titles, all of your retail things like, say, Skyrim as a good example that had to be authenticated on Steam. Big, big problems. Not a fan at all. And as I recall, Rock, Paper, Shotgun brought up a really good analogy. And it's a little bit absurd, but it really fits the topic, as sad as it sounds. Imagine going into a GameStop. Imagine getting kicked out of said GameStop because you're harassing other customers for whatever reason. You decide you're going to be a jackass. They kick you out. They follow you home. They go into your house. They take all of your games. You no longer have any of those games anymore. This is very close to that. But it's okay because it's a digital medium. Because you have to log into the account through them every single time you play. A little bit different than the GameStop analogy because, of course, you don't have to go into the GameStop to ask permission to play your game every single time you load up your computer. If you did, the analogies would be damn near perfect. Lastly, Lycan Dingo brings up the topic of StarCraft 2 and Blizzard moving in the wrong direction. In this particular case, I believe he's just misinformed. I don't think that he really understands the mechanics behind what's going on. What he said was that it's a huge problem that StarCraft 2 does not allow you to have an offline account upload at a later date. So if you're playing offline, you don't have access to your achievements. You don't have access to a lot of that sort of goal-based stuff, where then when you become an online player again, because your internet connection's back up, you got your ass off of the airplane, whatever it happens to be, that those achievements then get to carry forward. Now, the reason that this is, quite simply, is a situation of hacking and mechanics in the game itself. Diablo had a bit of a problem with this back when there was open and closed BattleNet. Open BattleNet was incredibly hacked all of the time. Much more so than closed BattleNet. Yes, there were problems on closed, but it wasn't as big of a deal compared to open. And the reason for that is because people were able to carry their characters on their own computer. They could hack the local copy, and then when they authenticated later on, when they went online, they could take that wonderful hacked character on with them. Now, it wasn't really as big a deal because they separated them. They had open and closed BattleNet. That was the choice. You could pick which one you wanted to play on. StarCraft 2 is an awful lot like that. If you want to play offline, that's fine. You give up a couple of things because it ruins the integrity of the achievement system if people can hack it and if people can get those achievements on their account without ever actually having done them in the game. It's actually a very good feature, quite frankly. That's why they did it. That's exactly why Blizzard did it. There's no other reason for them to have done it. I have a little bit of a problem with Diablo 3 because this one is a little bit different, maybe a little bit hazy, but I do understand exactly why they did it. Same sort of concept. Diablo 3 has a real money auction house, and this is where the problem actually starts to come into play, where now you have a single-player game that you can't even play offline. And it's because of the auction house. The auction house itself, involving real money, means that what Blizzard has to do is the same thing that they're doing with WoW. The server handles all communication as far as creature AI, item drops, all of those things. It doesn't allow the client to do any of those things, because as soon as you allow the client to do those things, you introduce hacking into the game again. It's not just a question of exploiting bugs and dealing with bugs in the client. You simply allow people to change their characters, and when real money is involved for an auction house like that, they simply can't allow it. That's why they did this in this particular way. I'm not a big fan of it because, to me, it seems like there should always be an option to have a single-player experience without being connected to the internet. I understand why they did it, and I suspect that it probably would have taken a significant amount of resources to create a client that both streamed the content in the same way that an MMO does from the server side, as from local resources in whatever CAB files, archive files, however they MPQs, I think Blizzard uses for all of their data and things like that. It makes a little bit more sense, but I've still got a really big problem with it. So to really bring the point home, I have a problem with the single-player removal and the authority that they're retaining to do this. That's really where the issue is for me. There is no excuse ever, as far as I'm concerned, for a company to remove single-player access from a game due to any reason at all. That includes hacking, that includes forum douchebaggery, that includes harassment of other players. All of those things are included in that. You can take away their online access, you can remove their ability to play with others or post on forums or any of these other sorts of things. You can even remove their ability to buy more games if you really feel like it. Of course, why would they do that? Those things are all okay. But when you take away that single-player experience, you've crossed a line. The only other industry that it really happens in is in movies, things like Netflix and stuff like that. But really, these are rental services. It's a different business model entirely, and I don't really mind all that much. All right, soapbox time is done. This has been Tarmack with the Gnomecast. May porcelain feet never touch your steps.